Intermittent fasting, the quickest path to ketosis. Now, we've talked about many things in this course, a lot of which has to do more with the content of what you're actually eating rather than the pattern of how you're going to eat. And that's essentially what intermittent fasting is. In our society today, intermittent fasting is essentially a type of diet. But really what we're going to talk about today is ketosis in combination with this type of pattern of eating. Okay, we can use this as a tool to essentially prime our bodies to generate ketones much more efficiently and also quicker. So let's go through it together. Intermittent fasting and ketosis. Think about humans before recorded time. So we were once hunter-gatherers. We would have to go out, we would have to hunt our food, we would have to find our food, pick our food from trees and bushes, and basically our feast period of time would be very short and our fasting period would be very long. We didn't know when our next meal was going to come. Now in today's society, we have a 7-Eleven, we have a McDonald's, we have a Starbucks on every single corner. Finding nourishment is extremely easy and almost effortless. You don't even have to expend any energy. All you do is get in your car, get out of the car, get it, eat it. We've expended no energy. Everything has been shortcutted for us. The human body becomes surprisingly efficient when devoid of food. Now, we've talked about this throughout this entire course. It's no stranger to us. In order for us to generate ketones, we need our body to understand that our fat that's on our body, the subcutaneous, the visceral, the fat within our blood, is our primary fuel source. Yes, we're going to eat lots and lots of fat. We're going to actually ingest it. But when that's not happening, we need our body to understand that our fat is the primary fuel source as well. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, these are going to be hormones that are going to be very efficient when your body is devoid of food. These essentially are going to sharpen your cognitive abilities. It's essentially going to increase the rate of your metabolism, which, just like in the hunter-gatherer days, if you don't have any food, if you have to go out and look for it, you're going to need something extra to give you some energy. Norepinephrine and epinephrine are going to be those hormones that are going to help you kind of focus and go out there and get what you need to get when food is not plentiful. Fatty acids mobilized to be broken down. First steps to ketosis. This has been a common theme throughout the entire course. In order for your body to get into a ketogenic state, we need fats to be mobilized. We need it to be the primary source of fuel. Research shows that many rejuvenation and healing properties occur when the body is absent of food, especially sugar, glucose, and glycogen. So going back to the section where we talked about disease states, essentially we talked about Alzheimer's, we talked about cancer, we talked about Parkinson's, lots of research that's being done in these studies. And essentially what's being shown is that glucose, the metabolism of sugar, is the problem here. Now, in order for us to really take advantage of these rejuvenation states, our body needs to be devoid of food. It needs to be in that famine state. This is when ketones are also going to be optimally created. Blood sugar must fall and glycogen stores must be depleted. I know, I've said it thousands of times. This piece is so important. I just want to ingrain it in your brain. If there's anything that you're going to take away from this course, this needs to be it. Intermittent fasting is a tool, a pattern of eating. It is not a diet. So as I mentioned earlier before, it's going to be a pattern in which you eat. We're going to talk about exactly how you can implement this pattern of eating and how it's going to help you get into ketosis and continue being ketogenic. A 2007 study out of the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, researchers divided participants into two groups. Each group consumed the same number of calories. The only difference was that one group consumed all their calories in 3 meals spread throughout the day, while the other practiced intermittent fasting, consuming the same amount of calories but in a restricted time frame. The participants who ate in a smaller window of time had a significant improvement in body composition, including substantial reduction in fat mass. So, if we have a smaller bracket of time with food in the body and a larger bracket of time fasted, the body is going to understand that fat, your body fat, is the primary fuel source. Yes, dietary fat is of course going to be the predominant fuel source, but for the purpose of intermittent fasting, for the purpose of understanding that body fat, your body fat, is the predominant fuel source, to understand that visceral fat, the visceral fat that causes disease, is going to be the predominant fuel source. In order for you to take advantage of these benefits, we need to spend time in a fasted state. Not only that, as it pertains to ketosis, the more that you spend time in a fasted state, the more efficient your body is going to be in creating ketones. 8 to 12 hours must pass before your body starts the process of fat mobilization. This can be different for almost anybody. For some people, it could be 8. For some people, it could be 12. For some people, it can be even 14. It really does depend on the individual. But the bottom line here is this. Across the board, if you quickly deplete glycogen stores, if you quickly decrease your blood sugar levels, your body is going to become ketogenic much faster. And essentially, the best way to do this is to stop eating. Yes, we're going to eat large amounts of fat and little amounts of carbohydrates, and that's going to get us into ketosis. But if you want to force the body immediately, then all you have to do is have a long period of fasting. And we're going to talk about how you can implement that a practical way into your life. So we've talked about dietary fat throughout this entire course, and we talked about nutritional ketosis and how we can manipulate the body into understanding that fat is the predominant fuel source. But if we were taking intermittent fasting as the tool to force the body into ketosis, this is what needs to happen. So glucose needs to drop, which is going to happen if you're in a fasted state. Glycogen stores need to be depleted. So you're not replenishing glycogen stores, your sugar stores in your muscles, in your liver, you're not replenishing them if you're in a fasted state. Now, we talked about 8 to 12 hours, that bracket of time being the time period that it's going to take for this to take place. And essentially, your fat stores are going to be mobilized. Those fat stores are now going to be used as fuel. And as it pertains to ketosis, ketones are going to be created at a much higher rate. I came across a research study that I found to be very interesting, and it had to do with obese mice and them being fed a diet that was high in both fat and fructose. Now, these mice were split into two groups. The first group was a group of mice that was fed a diet ad libitum, or free-feeding diet. And the second group of mice was a group of mice that was going to incorporate intermittent fasting into their diet. However, when they did eat, they would be able to free feed as well. The really interesting thing was the first group that free fed without intermittent fasting became morbidly obese from obese. And the second group, the one that intermittent fasted but was allowed to eat as much as they wanted during those periods of time they ate, were obese fit mice. So essentially what happened here is the obese fit mice, they were weight stable because of the intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is going to lead to increased growth hormone, decreased insulin, increased ketone production, and increased norepinephrine, and which essentially is going to lead to that increased fatty acid metabolism, which is essentially going to be the root of how we create ketones. So how do we apply this? How do we apply intermittent fasting into a ketogenic diet? So we already know what types of foods that we're going to be eating. We know the content. We know what we're eating. So how do we apply this? Because essentially all you might be hearing is that, well, just stop eating more often. Yes, but also no. We need to find a practical way to do this. And what better way than to take advantage of something that's already programmed into our life? And that's going to be your sleep time. So let's talk about that for a moment. So our sleep time on average is going to take 6 to 9 hours of our time. Now, as we talked about before, 8 to 12 hours is what you need in order for your body to start mobilizing fats as fuel. So we're almost there. And if you're somebody who maybe sleeps 10 hours and then doesn't eat maybe an hour or two after, then you've already hit it. So let's talk about how you're going to apply this into your life. So let's go through a couple of scenarios where you could take advantage of this intermittent fasting tool so that way your body becomes more efficient at generating ketones and that you can get to your goals a little bit quicker. Not only that, you could take advantage of some of these healing processes that can actually take place. Now, we have 3 meals. This stands for sunrise, this stands for noon, and this stands for sunset, meaning it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now let's go over a couple of scenarios. So let's just say we don't eat throughout the night. You've made it through the night. Maybe you've slept 8 hours, maybe you've slept 9 hours, and then maybe after that you spent maybe another hour or 2 getting ready, and then you eat breakfast. It's possible that you've spent between 6 and 12 hours in a fasted state, which now you might be taking advantage of some of these properties that intermittent fasting can give you. Now let's just say you're on the lower end, closer to the 6 hours. We still have some time to make up. Here's another option. What we can do is we can give up breakfast. Okay, now hear me out. We're giving up breakfast and we are adding the fact that we're not eating in the morning with our sleep time at night. And this can give us between 12 and 18 hours in a fasted state, which is a big deal. And in my opinion, between 12 and 18 hours is really where you're going to hit your stride, where hunger pretty much kind of hits this static line where you're not really feeling hunger, you're very satisfied, and you have this ample amount of energy. It's fantastic. Now, let's just say you really wanted to go to the distance and you really wanted to take advantage of these properties and you wanted to get to your goals a little bit faster. You wanted to see how ketosis really works, how the energy levels can really send you to another level from a cognitive standpoint, a healing standpoint, a physical standpoint. We can eat 1 meal a day. And like we've talked about in those studies, that 1 meal a day can account for all of your calories. So let's talk about that. So instead of that lunch and breakfast, now we're just having dinner. And that's essentially going to be where you're eating every 24 hours. And that's a long time to be in a fasted state. And it's understandable if you're a little worried, but as we talked about before, if we have a fuel source that makes up 40,000 upwards of that calories, then we have a fuel source on our body that's perfectly fine. Another option could be putting your sleep time at the end of the fast rather than at the beginning. This way you can remove either dinner or lunch or both. Now, if you calculated your BMR and your activity factor, and you've now decided how many meals you're going to have in the day, you're going to want to take the amount of calories, the amount of macronutrients, and divide it by the amount of meals that you're going to have in the day. So let's look at that for a second. So we have 3 meals here. We calculate our BMR and multiply it by the activity factor. And let's just say we get 1,875 calories. Now, if we were to divide it by 3 meals, then we would get 625 calories per meal and whatever your macronutrients divide out to be. So you're basically just going to take your proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and you're going to divide them up by 3 meals. Now, if let's just say we're removing one of the meals and we're only having 2 meals, you're going to divide that 1,875 calories by the 2 meals, and you're going to get 938 calories per meal. The same thing with your macronutrients, your proteins, carbs, and fats. You want to divide them up by 2. Now, if you're deciding to go the distance and have 1 meal a day, then essentially you're just going to be eating 1 meal that's 1,875 calories, and you're essentially just taking the macronutrients for what they say. So what do we take away from this section? Intermittent fasting is a tool. It is not a diet. It is a pattern of eating that if we combine it with ketosis, we are going to be able to put ourselves in a ketogenic state much quicker and create ketones at a much more efficient rate. This section has been huge, guys. If you guys can understand that both ketosis and intermittent fasting can work hand in hand, your goals are in reach. See you guys in the next one. Now, let's run it back because this is a ton of information that we have just ingested. So we talked about leptin and insulin, the two hormones that are at the forefront of energy, metabolism, and how they are connected to the neurotransmitter dopamine, which essentially is that voice in your head that says, look, I just want one more cookie, all right? Just one more. I swear it's just one more. We talked about ketosis, what it is, how to measure it, and why it is so much more efficient to use ketones as our primary source of fuel. We talked about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, the exact percentages that we should be having depending on our health status, the exact grams and calorie amounts to personalize it to your life. We talked about minerals and hydration. To ensure that keto adapting is nice and smooth, we need to make sure that we are hydrating and that we are repleting the minerals that we are losing. We talked about how to track our progress through taking measurements. And we talked about intermittent fasting, that last tool that is going to be so important to put everything together to get you to your goals. Now, if all of this didn't convince you already, I promise you this next section will. We're going to talk about what researchers and scientists are doing today using ketosis to fight non-communicable diseases, cancer, diabetes, atherosclerosis, Parkinson's, and so on. Let's get into it. I'm really excited for it. See you there.